Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Young, the founder and CEO of Realm. Thank you all for coming today. I want to start by recognizing what everyone in this room is going through. Other than losing a loved one, I don't know if there's anything that's harder than losing your home. The financial toll, the emotional toll, it's difficult to describe. Everyone in this room today has either been directly impacted themselves, is a friend and family member of someone that was impacted, or is trying to help. So I want to say thank you to everyone who came today. It means a lot to us, and it means a lot to everyone else that's in the room. Why are we here? Why is Realm here? The answer is we've been here for a long time. So I started Realm 5 years ago after I got ripped off doing a big home renovation. I spent way too much money. I got bad quality work done, and I thought, why does this work this way? Like this feels crazy. And I said, okay, we're going to make it really easy for people to have peace of mind and get great quality work done at fair prices. So we started working with homeowners in California. We actually worked with our first homeowner in Altadena on March 6, 2021. Since then, we've worked with over 101 to be exact, homeowners in Altadena. So today, we're happy to help in any way that we can. We're going to keep doing what we've been doing for the last 4 years, and that's try to help you tackle this incredibly daunting process of rebuilding, and really to give individual homeowners the power and the voice of hundreds of homeowners to get their rebuilds done better, faster, and more affordably. When you leave today, I hope that there's two things that happen. One is that you learn something. We have amazing speakers. Thank you so much to our speakers you'll hear from. I'm excited to learn from them. So I hope you learn at least something that helps you feel more confident in navigating this process. And then two, that you feel supported. You're not alone. You're here. You have the support of everyone in this room. So thank you for taking time. I'm excited to learn with you. I'm here, I'm around, and committed to helping in any way that we can. Carrie? For you.
I don't have much to say. I'm the MC. FEMA, would like to say a couple words? Oh, sure.
Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure that everyone is aware that FEMA is in the back of the room. We're here to do registrations if you need to register with us. If you have received a letter from us, please don't assume that you are not eligible for something. Read your letter from us. It may say that we need more information from you. Please read it carefully. You can go to the local DRC in Altadena on Woodsbury, and they can help you with anything that you need in the process with FEMA.
All right, so our first speaker is Bijana. She's a licensed therapist in LA, specializing in outpatient programs, school therapy as well. Been in LA for a long time. Thank you, Bijana.
Thank you so much. My name is Bijana Bailleres. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and professional clinical counselor, as well as a fellow community member impacted by these wildfires. I want to acknowledge again all of you who are here today. You or someone you love has also been affected. Recovery, both physical and emotional, takes time. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about what that process can look like. I'll be covering the emotional impact of the wildfires today, the psychological challenges of rebuilding, coping strategies, and how to find meaning in recovery. Wildfires are sudden and devastating. The emotional impact of these wildfires is hard to fathom, and it can be incredibly hard to emotionally prepare for something that is so abrupt and sudden. This can trigger a range of emotions. Some of these emotional responses include shock and numbness. This looks like feeling disconnected or on autopilot right after the event. Disconnected from your body, maybe unable to communicate about your experience to loved ones, or feeling really numb as you're talking about it. Looks like sadness and grief, mourning the loss of homes, possessions, memories, and sometimes even community members. Looks like anger, frustration at the situation, slow recovery efforts, or feeling powerless. Anxiety and hypervigilance, this is something that my patients are talking a lot about right now. This looks like increased fear, difficulty sleeping, worrying about the potential of a future disaster. And survivor's guilt, feeling guilty for losing perhaps less than others, or feeling like one of the lucky ones. Trauma impacts the nervous system, making people feel stuck in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And recognizing these responses is the first step towards healing. When we've lost a basic human need, right, food, water, and shelter, we are going to be in a trauma response, especially right after the event. Our shelter has been taken from us, and it is natural and it is normal to be experiencing any and all of these emotions and having a real challenge being able to move forward with that rebuilding process. So challenges people commonly face in the rebuilding process. This looks like decision fatigue. Navigating insurance claims, finances, and rebuilding choices can feel so overwhelming. Shout out to Realm for putting this together today to help us navigate this very difficult portion of the recovery process. Also looks like family strain, circling back a bit to that fight, flight, and freeze response. If our partner, right, partner A is a freeze responder and our partner B is a fight responder, partner B, who maybe has a fight response, is wanting to go, solve, fix, and get this process done as soon as possible, right? But partner A, who might be a freezer, is gonna feel paralyzed by the process and uncomfortable moving forward. When we have this kind of tension in our partnerships, it can feel really, really difficult to get going and to move forward. And so understanding our own emotional response as well as our partners is going to be paramount as you're moving forward so that you can communicate about it. And again, when our fight, flight, freeze is activated, we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex. This is the more developed part of our brain. This part helps with reasoning, making decisions, and really anything related to executive functioning. Being able to talk about it and articulate to our partners what's going on can really, really be helpful. Okay. Uncertainty about the future. So questions about financial stability, safety, and whether or not rebuilding is even worth it. So really challenging emotional sort of barrier we encounter. Then we have frustration with setbacks, delays, bureaucracy, and rising costs. These can be so discouraging. Acknowledging these challenges and normalizing them is so important as we move through this process together. You are not alone in feeling this way. Moving on to coping strategies and resilience building. So resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about moving through it in a healthy way. Let's see. Strategies for managing emotions and stress during this rebuilding process. These look like grounding techniques, deep breathing, mindfulness, and sensory-based grounding exercises. These help manage anxiety. So of course, these aren't going to fix these huge challenges we're facing, but they are going to help calm our fight, flight, freeze response and give us more access to that prefrontal cortex, that decision-making part of our brain, so that we can move forward. I've left a pamphlet at the front for you guys that has a more exhaustive list of some of my favorite mindfulness and grounding techniques for you to take a look at later on. Next are routines and structure. So even small, predictable daily habits can create a sense of normalcy when we're feeling displaced. Maybe this looks like scheduling a 45-minute walk at 8 o'clock in the morning every morning so that our brains have something that they're looking forward to, that they can expect. And sort of speaking in terms of the rebuilding process, if this is a really triggering process for you to move through, having a scheduled time or day that you're kind of committing to focusing on this, maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 p.m. You and your family or loved ones kind of sit down and talk about the next steps going forward. It can help, again, calm our nervous system when we're expecting something that's a little uncomfy to talk about. Seeking support, connecting with therapists, support groups, or community organizations. This can really help prevent the feelings of isolation that we encounter when doing something like this. On the following slides, I will list some great community resources and therapists who are offering free services for you. Let's see, highly encourage you to do that. Those are also on your pamphlet. It's a little bit more of an extensive list than what I've got here on the slides on the next page. Let's see. Finally, balancing grief with hope. So honoring that this is a devastating experience and also feeling a sense of excitement about the next steps moving forward and what can be born of such a painful experience. Ask yourself, what small steps can I take today to make this process more manageable? If we're zooming out and looking all the way to the finish line, this rebuilding process can feel impossible. Our goal is to take this giant task and break it down into smaller, more achievable goals so that we can calm ourselves, move forward, and successfully rebuild. Finding hope and meaning in the rebuilding process. Excuse me. So that looks like honoring what was lost, maybe making a memory book, planting something new, or holding a community gathering. I've got a patient who lost only part of her home in the Altadena fire, and she took a portion of her blinds as sort of carving that out and framing it to place in her new home as sort of a way to commemorate the loss, and then also honor the resilience and the beauty that can be created from starting new. Finding purpose. Many people find purpose in helping others, sharing a story, or advocating for better disaster preparedness in the future. The power of connection, of course. Healing often happens in relationships. Leaning on your community and others to support you is a great way to heal. Small steps to regain control. Even small victories like finalizing a rebuilding plan or creating a new home vision can restore a sense of agency. Recovery is not linear. Some days will be harder than others, but over time, healing is possible. On this slide, I've got resources for support. In response to these wildfires, several organizations are offering free therapy sessions and support groups to assist affected individuals. We've got Engaged Psychological Services and Maple Counseling Center. They're offering 6 free therapy sessions to individuals who are impacted by the fires. Bridge the Gap Services, they're offering free group therapy sessions for middle and high school age students affected by the fires. And then the LA Mutual Aid Resource Hub offering 8 free virtual therapy sessions for those impacted by the wildfires. Our LA County specific resource, you can dial 800-851-7771 or text LA to 741-741 to access local mental health services available 24/7. As I close my portion of this talk today, I want to introduce you to one of the most simple, but also one of the most helpful grounding exercises that I know and use in my practice. When our homes have been taken away from us, we can find a sense of home and a sense of calm in our bodies and through our breaths, which cannot be taken away. I want to invite you all to hold your finger out, just like this. I want to invite you to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds. 2 more times just like that, breathing in through your nose. Hold. Breathe out. And hold. In. Hold. Out. And hold. That's box breathing. Thank you so much for having me here today, and enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Bijana. I didn't know that I needed that, but I needed that. Our next speaker is the founder of Captain, dedicated to helping homeowners rebuild after wildfires, tornadoes, hurricanes. He's from Kentucky, so witnessed these types of disasters firsthand. I just heard that he led a convoy of 30 trucks from Kentucky here to help with the debris removal. So he's bridging the gap across the country, which is a beautiful thing. So thank you, Demetrius Gray.
Okay, they said speak loudly. Good morning. Okay, hold on. I'm a down on the ground person, okay? So I'm gonna do this from here. And somebody's gonna maybe come, oh, you come with me. That's wonderful. And somebody's gonna click for me. I appreciate that. Good morning. All right, good. Yeah, it was 30 hours, which was a long way here, but my name is Demetrius Gray, like she said. I was the founder and CEO of a company called Captain, before that a company called WeatherCheck. And I spent my entire career as a founder building in insurance technology, financial technology related to disaster recovery. So I have worked the Marshall Fire in Louisville, Colorado, Hurricane Helene most recently. We did the large debris removal for both the Army Corps as well as FEMA in that market, alongside Sirius Environmental and a number of other agencies across 3 states. And so have a little bit of an experience of like what you can expect and what things might look like. You know, every event is different, right? Whether it's a wildfire or a hurricane. My family home was destroyed by the Western Kentucky tornadoes in 2021 on December the 8th, right? And for me, that was a family home that'd been in our family for since 1865, right? And so a challenging moment, you know, a challenging moment to see an entire community have to deal with such a devastating circumstance. And so my heart is certainly with you guys as you deal with the next phase of this. You've heard probably about 3 agencies so far. So you've heard FEMA, you've heard SBA, you've heard probably Army Corps, which is the Department of Defense. There are actually 14 other agencies that have disaster assistance programs, right? And they sort of all turn on at different times throughout the recovery process. And so one of those that's commonly used is HUD, right? The Department of Housing and Urban Development. They have community development block grant dollars that are related to disaster recovery. And so your long-term recovery groups will start to work through some of those unmet needs as we continue to move forward. I know it takes a little bit of time to like make sense of all of this, but it will eventually start to move and you'll start to see some momentum be gained around the recovery process. The other thing that I'll point out is that, you know, all of these programs they have a lot of discretion. And so your voice in this conversation matters so much. I know so many of you are going to the town halls and you've been in 50 million meetings at this point. It's really important for you to continue to stand up. And so part of what I like to do is I like to tell people, hey, here's what you should ask for. Hey, here's what you should say. And so one of the things that you guys can be saying now is with the CDBG DR, which is Community Development Block Grant dollars, you need to make sure that your local officials say, hey, we do not want you to base the need on what's called AMI or LMI, which is low to moderate income. We need it to be based on just the need of the community. HUD has that discretion, right? And so what that means is that every single family in your community will be able to participate in that program. Let me give you an example of what that might look like. There were Eastern Kentucky floods in 2022, and you maybe saw those on the news. And those floods, I think the Biden administration awarded roughly $300 million in unmet need funds through HUD for the rebuilding and relocation of homes, right? That is a consistent thing that the federal government does, but you don't really see it on the front end. You eventually see it somewhere in the disaster recovery process. And so you really need to be aware that like that program is the one that will really help a lot of folks in your community really fill the gaps, right, that exist. Underinsurance is just a thing. Throughout the United States, it was a major thing in Colorado, it was a major thing in Lahaina. And so, you know, those are the areas where we need to be vocal and say, hey, we want you to make sure that you base this program not on, adjusted or low to moderate income. We need it to be based where everybody can use these funds, right? You're all taxpayers, and that's really important. I think the other piece here is that you need to sort of understand that, okay, yes, this is a marathon and not a sprint, right? The therapist talked about like decision fatigue and what you're enduring. Part of that is that people feel like they need to make a decision really quickly, right? And it is worth sort of taking a breath and understanding and holding and breathing, right? Because the reality is that I know it might feel like you need to make a decision right away, but the reality is that the average disaster in the United States takes roughly 7 to 10 years. And in this case, we expect that it will probably take 10 to 15, right? And just because of the complexity that exists within these markets.
Question for you, you were talking about CDP, GDR. If the courts allow President Trump to cancel the federal government's grants and loans, what do you expect out of HUD, EPA, and some of the other 14 federal agencies that are all operating on grants?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. What I would normally tell most people is, let me go find out, right? What I can tell you is that it's unique that I'm from the state of Kentucky, right? Because FEMA answers to the Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, and my state senator, who happens to be a friend, Rand Paul, happens to be the chair of that committee, right? So he and I've had some conversations around like, okay, what's gonna happen, right? What things can we change? What things can we modify? And so I do think that, like, at the end of the day, most of these things are statutory. They're not regulatory, right? What I can say is that most of the things that you've seen the administration start to touch are regulatory changes that they're making, not statutory changes. Meaning that because Congress put it into an act and passed it, then those things tend to be remaining. A good example of this is the SBA's 8A program as an example, right? Still intact, still doing what it needs to do. So hopefully that answers some of your question, but I'll do some more research if that's okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the whole community. Individual projects will move progressively on the 3 to 4 year range, but from an entire community perspective, 10 to 15 is what you can realistically expect. And I know that most people don't want to sort of put the number out there, but that's the average national. Next slide. So, like, what should you be doing now? Like, how do you fill the gap, right? Many of you probably have some sort of insurance gap. If you don't have one, you probably actually do. You just don't realize it. Most of the folks that I'm working with today are looking at their insurance coverage and they're saying, hey, I've got dwelling coverages, and if I put that with my personal property, I can get my house rebuilt. But what happens once the house is rebuilt? You now got to furnish that house, right? And so you actually do have a coverage gap issue. Where we typically start, and I think FEMA sort of gives this advice, right? They want you to put your declarations pages in and all that stuff, right? What they really want you to do is maximize your personal insurance coverages first, right? And I often tell folks, it's your insurance coverage, but also think about the other areas in which other people's insurance coverage might be to bear, right? This is something that's often missed within insurance policies, is like the general liability portions of policies that, hey, that tree that it burned and it fell over onto my property. Well, that's covered by someone else's policy and it can be paid for under their policy. There's specific limits for that, right? But we might miss that if we're not aware, right? Because at this moment, it is about maximizing the total amount of proceeds that you have so that you can put the project back together effectively. The other piece that I'd say is, like, don't forget these other agencies. The other piece is, like, state and local government are always going to have their funds. So I think the LA County Fund now sits at about $32 million. And largely that's being used for the long-term recovery effort, right? I think I was on a call yesterday with SoCal grant makers. I think there are right now 19 funds that have been set up around the community to support the long-term recovery effort. And their specific focus is really dealing with what it looks like to do long-term recovery beyond just the immediate relief. So you've seen the disaster and donation centers and all that sort of stuff, but no, these larger nonprofits, that's the Parsons Foundation and others, are really committing to what's it look like over the next, several years for us to support not just individual families, but also nonprofit organizations and businesses. I do also know that for those of you who are business owners, there is a business interruption fund that is being set up presently to support businesses in the community who might be experiencing losses that way. And so,
Yeah, so I maybe you'll be able to answer this, or maybe there's already funds set up if you see this done in the past. For those of us who have ALA, additional living expenses, and mine will shut off in 2 years, and I'm not gonna get back in my home in 2 years, is there potentially a fund that's going to address that on the state or federal level?
well, I think it goes back to my earlier question or statement around knowing what to ask for, right? So we've seen instances around the country where FEMA and temporary housing assistance vouchers have actually been recertified, right? So that's why it's incredibly important that you register with FEMA, right, in these scenarios. And I do think that that's something that folks should be asking for in this scenario, is, hey, go ahead and recertify the temporary housing assistance and long-term housing assistance at the federal level so that it gets extended beyond that 18 months. It can happen, but we should be asking for it. Sure.
And how do we find out, I don't spend hours on searching online, there are people who do, unfortunately, I don't have that kind of patience. How do we learn about these philanthropic, or however you want to say that, those, grants that are available?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's hard. There's a lot of information out there. I think everybody's been to the recovery website and lots of links, right?
Yeah, I imagine these community outreach meetings are going to be less and less as we,
Sure.
6 months from now, a year from now, and then when we're looking to fill that gap, how do we find out about these?
Yeah, so there's a national organization called VOAD, right? Volunteers Organizing After Disasters. And you may not know it, but you actually already had one here, right? It's called LARCRO. It's Los Angeles Recovery, or Los Angeles Regional Recovery Organizations, I think is how what the acronym means. But these folks are folks in your community who have been impacted by the Wildfire in 2018 and others, the Camp Fire, the Santa Rosa Fire as an example. And what happens is all of the nonprofit organizations that exist, if you've been to Kaiser, LARCRO was actually who hosted that opportunity hub. They will continue to support and they'll set up disaster case management to help you identify which of those nonprofits and different organizations and philanthropic funds might suit your specific set of needs, right? So it is a scenario in which you don't have to do it all yourself, right? It's really just getting you to the right person to help you navigate through that. And it is as hands-on as them doing it for you, to the point of not actually going and looking for it and spending time online researching yourself.
And just to chat, we'll have a Q&A after.
Okay,
just
cool.
For the sake of everyone getting through what
Yes,
they're speaking about, but appreciate the questions. Great questions.
Will you repeat the name of the agency you just mentioned? Or was
it's LARCRO, LARCRO.org. Next slide. Oh, we have the last one. So this is what the stack looks like, folks. So personal savings, if you got it, insurance proceeds, philanthropic grants, and then government grants, right? And that stack comes together, right, to actually get you to the point where your project is whole, right? And so there's a way to do that well. Your disaster case managers and folks can help you through that. Next slide. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is back one slide. Tell me, y'all ready? Yeah, good. Okay, awesome. So let's talk team, right? Who do you need on your team in order to get this thing done, right? Because it's clear that it's a pretty big undertaking. So you have your independent insurance adjuster that they work for the insurance carrier. You got your disaster case manager that works for the nonprofit and who's been given to you. I think Catholic Charities has the contract here in this region to work alongside FEMA. You have maybe an owner's representative. That's kind of the work that I do. Maybe you have an attorney. I know folks have talked to the whole SoCal thing, Cal Edison thing. We can talk about how to do that well. You might have a public adjuster who works for you to the insurance company, and then you've got your general contractor, right? All of that has to work together well. And so part of the reason that I partnered with Realm was because there is a recognition that it all kind of has to come together neatly in a way that makes sense. And it's not the same as if you've built a home before. It's not the same as building a home on a random Thursday, right? There's justification and things that, simple things like documenting the construction process well enough to make sure that you're reimbursed for certain coverages, right? Itemizing all your personal contents. All that stuff is tough, right? And so part of what you want to do is make sure that you built a sort of team around your project that makes sense so that you can get through the recovery process well. And so part of what I love about Realm, and because I don't think we had a Realm in Kentucky, it was just us the blind leading the blind at that point. But really start to understand, okay, how do I underwrite? Because one of the things I want to say, and I know I'm at time, is that what happens in these scenarios, you can't use your conventional wisdom for how you would normally choose in a disaster. It doesn't work. Because what I'm telling you is happening right now. There are private equity firms that are buying construction companies right now because they know that there's high demand. So the company that has been around for 50 years that you thought was owned by the man down the street, that changes, right? Like all of those things start to change. And so how do you operate under those circumstances? Well, you do it with really great partners who can help reinforce your decisions or say, hey, maybe we should think about that a little bit more, those sort of things as we move forward. And so it's a sort of slow and steady wins the race, right? Scenario here, and being sort of diligent in your decision making as you move forward. Listen, I'm saying prayers for you guys every day, just that you sort of make it through the recovery process. There will certainly be moments where you want to throw in the towel and say, forget it, I'm moving down the road, right? But there is a world in which there's, joy for your mourning and beauty for your ashes in these scenarios. And so, I'll be here for the next 2 to 3 years helping you guys through that. And so back and forth to Kentucky every now and again. But we're committed to seeing this community rebuilt, and we can do it. All right?
Oh, thank you. Q&A will stay for the end. We have a designated time for it, which is great because you can listen to everyone and then come with your questions then. We'll also email this presentation to everyone so that you have it, the full thing. And we have coffee. That was the most important. I saved the best for last. So our next speaker is a partner at Rocca Builders, been building homes in LA since the 80s. He himself evacuated due to wildfires twice. It really specializes in design, engineering, demolition, hazardous waste disposal, the full tilt. He also served on the evaluation team for the Wildfire in Lake Arrowhead and Cedar Glen communities, reviewing, rebuilding, really being a part of the community and the efforts there. Let's welcome Don.
Hello, everybody. Unlike Demetris, I am a pilot, so I prefer to be a little higher up when I'm doing my presentation. I'm a Realm partner. I appreciate Realm very much having me do this presentation. I'm also very, very sorry that everyone here is going through this disaster, both losing a home or damage to your home, and I'm hoping My information can get you through a little bit of information on the demo and the removal. The process has a lot more detail. Most of where I found the information is available to you online, but I will give you a presentation that basically gives you the outline of where you're going to go on demo and removal of the debris. The debris removal process is divided into two main phases, each managed by different agencies. Residents have an option to participate in the government-run program or manage the cleanup independently by opting in or opting out. This is done by registering online, or you can mail in a form which Realm will make available to you. If your property has been damaged or destroyed, If your property has been damaged or destroyed, it must pass a phase 1 household hazardous debris inspection and clearance by the EPA before being eligible for moving into phase 2 removal process. Property owners won't be able to get a phase 2 permit unless they have received a phase 1 clearance. This picture shows you that the phase 1 clearance will be a sign posted on the outside of your property saying that the phase 1 has been completed. The hazardous waste removal process, the first stage of the cleanup by the EPA, will be to remove potentially dangerous everyday products like paint, cleaners, solvents, oils, very important, batteries if you have an electric car that got damaged, pesticides, asbestos that is identifiable. These are vent pipes and so forth that are visible, that fall, that did not get consumed by the fire. Pressurized tanks like propane tanks, air tanks, whatever might be. If you have specific questions about phase 1, there is a phone number that the EPA has, 833-798-7372. You can call that phone number and get further information. Phase 1 is being paid by the federal government. The hazardous waste materials will be staged in a landfill at the Lario Federal Staging Area in Azusa. The timeline, it started on the 28th. The EPA has been tasked with completing the process for all homes affected by the fire within 30 days. I did a lot of research on the Paradise campfire, and I can tell you that it took more than 6 months to get to that phase. So although they're tasked with it, I would say that there's going to be the possibility that could be 3 to 6 months. In phase 1, each property will be issued the certificate of compliance that I previously mentioned to you, and that all the hazardous waste has been successfully removed so that you're approved to go to phase 2. Without the certificate, you cannot progress to phase 2. Debris removal will be done by the Army Corps of Engineers if you have opted in. That means you had to fill out the form, you had to get it completed, and then turned in by March 31st is the deadline for phase 1 Army Corps of Engineers. There is a prime contractor that the Army Corps of Engineers will be using. The contractor's name is ECC. They are responsible for hiring the subcontractors that will be doing the work during phase 2 of the debris removal. I am and have filed for approval. I would be a typical subcontractor for ECC to be able to do this removal. We're not assigned, we don't know where we're assigned once we get this approval. It's just going to be assigned by ECC going forward. Please do not call ECC. They're managing the subcontractors doing the work. They're not responsible to the homeowners at that point. The cost for phase 2 is being paid by the federal government. Timeline based on my research with the Paradise Fire, it will start in phase 2 will start in 3 months. It could take as long as 3 months to 12 months to complete. If you're opted out and you're going to have a private contractor do your debris removal, if you choose a private contractor, you opted out on your mail-in and or on your online application. You must receive an approval from the county and a permit from the applicable local city authority to proceed. You will be responsible for hiring the appropriately licensed and certified contractor. If the asbestos consultant finds asbestos during the initial hazardous waste, you're going to be responsible for having the asbestos removed if you opted out. The work must be completed in compliance with all local rules and regulations related to debris removal. Private contractors must also adhere to the same haul routes for the safety and standards being used by the Army Corps of Engineers to minimize the neighborhood disruptions. This will include retaining a certified asbestos consultant to conduct a survey to identify asbestos debris. Using a licensed approved contractor, very important. To check, this is for you to check that you're hiring an appropriate licensed contractor. You can go to the Contractor State License Board website, cslb.com, .org. The website, to check the license, you can either enter the contractor's license number or his name. I prefer getting his license number. It's going to be easier for you to find him. Anybody doing private debris removal must either have a license, A, general engineering license, B, general contractor license, C21, which is a building moving or demolition license. And the reasons you use a licensed contractor, certified to do the job, he must carry appropriate insurances, both liability and workman's comp for its employees. Will hire only a licensed hauler, very, very important. I'll get into that a little later. That is approved to move the debris to the appropriate waste and disposal facility. Bonded by surety company that he or she will complete the work. I have to tell you in my experience that there are numerous scams related to debris removal. Hiring an unlicensed contractor will make you liable for the following: injury to the worker not covered by workman's comp, hauling debris to a non-authorized disposal facility, dumping fire debris on an unauthorized vacant land. I have personal experience in cleaning up in Lake Arrowhead, where an unlicensed contractor dumped it in a canyon 8 miles from the fire location, and we had to go in with a separate crew to clean it up, and it was a very expensive process. We did track it back to the homeowner. Requesting payment in advance of work not yet being completed. Often get contractors that say, I want a 50% deposit before I even show up. Not allowed. They have to complete the work, and then they can get paid in sequence. The cost of working with a private contractor. The cost will vary widely and will be paid by an insurance or homeowner directly. However, based on my experience and data from the Paradise Fire, assuming phase 1 certificate to proceed to phase 2 is issued and a house size of approximately 2,000 square feet, the average cost was $55,000. Should be expected, a range from $24,000 to $80,000 based on home size, landscape complexity, conditions. Some example of variance to this cost would be size of home, steel construction, location and access to the home, foundation removal, pool removal, hardscape, walkways, driveways, planters, landscape, underground plumbing and electrical, and of course asbestos. The timeline to complete debris clearing, and this is my personal experience, is about 3 weeks or sooner. My crews can usually demo a house, garage, clean the landscaping, and do it in about 3 weeks. After the asbestos evaluation report, that's when we can proceed. What do you expect during demo and debris removal? At the start of the project, the operational crews will attempt to contact you 72 hours prior to starting debris removal work on your property. In the meantime, please ensure that the assessment and safety crews are able to access your property by unlocking gates if they exist and/or providing access codes. You can give this to the EPA by calling 833-798-7372. Foundations, there's a lot of questions on this. My experience is that most foundations are adversely affected by the fire. The rebar is melted, the hold downs are melted. Most of the time, 70% of the time, we are removing the foundations. The Army Corps of Engineers will make that determination on their initial inspections. And most likely, homes over 35 years may not have rebar in the foundation. They'll probably be 100% removed. If the home is substantially damaged by fire and requires demolition, FEMA will make the determination on eligibility. If the home is found to be eligible, the Army Corps of Engineers will demo and remove the fire debris at no charge. Soil removal. There's been a lot of speculation. The average is a 6-inch removal of the top layer of dirt. This dirt is hauled off and is incinerated in a class 4 dump site that has facilities to incinerate the soil. It's very difficult to clean any soil that has asbestos, oil, or any kind of environmental contaminants. It's usually done 2 to 5 feet around the ash footprint of the home. Once debris removal management teams have ensured that the cleanup meets the program standards, contractors will return to install erosion control methods. Basically, if it rains, we have sandbags, we have hay runners and different things to make sure that it meets stormwater evacuation. The debris management teams will then report to the county that the debris removal is complete. The county will then notify you that your property is safe and ready to be rebuilt on. I'm going to answer questions afterwards, and I appreciate your time. And again, I hope this process and my information helps.
Thanks, Don. It's chilly in here. The coffee's hot. That I only got coffee jokes, I guess. So our next speaker will be covering fire-resistant home design. He's a licensed architect in California. He designed a home in Santa Monica Mountains that withstood 2 fires recently. And he also helped tremendously in the Woolsey fire and rebuilding. So an expert when it comes to how to design your home in the future. Thanks, Mark.
I'm going to start with this, and maybe as you blow out, warm your hands a little bit. Go to the next slide. There's a lot of pictures in here. Classic architect, too much information, want to put pretty pictures in, so let me try to get through the finish. Oh, can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, that's way better.
Better? Okay. So this is kind of a Captain Obvious statement, but, sorry, what? Oh, yeah. My name is Mark Nichols. My company is M. Nichols Design. I'm licensed in California and Washington State. And yeah, you'll get a PDF of this as well with all this information, and happy to give you my personal information afterwards. So this is kind of a Captain Obvious statement, but wildfires are a force of nature. They're comparable to tornadoes, to earthquakes, and the level of destruction is on par with that. And it might feel hopeless if you're designing something to say, how can my home withstand a force of nature? Fortunately, over time with building codes, we've gotten better at it. Buildings are more earthquake resistant. They're also more fire resistant. A lot of the homes that were built in this community and all throughout LA County up until about the 1980s were built not subjected to current building codes. And because of that, they're a lot more susceptible to fire. Fire is like a living organism, right? It needs fuel to keep going. It wants to consume. So fire-resistant design is starving of fire. Current code helps you achieve that, and there are things that we can do beyond code that'll make your home even more resilient to fires. So first, it might be helpful to talk about different construction types. You may have seen on social media like, hey, this one house survived the wildfire. How did it do it? Sometimes it's luck. I've seen an instance where it was an all concrete home, and now people are saying, oh, you should only build concrete homes. It's problematic. And let me get into that a little bit. So there's 5 different building types in the building code. There's non-combustible, type 1 and type 2. That's primarily reinforced concrete and protected steel buildings. That's like most high rises that you see, certain hazardous waste facilities, institutional facilities, industrial facilities might be that construction type. There's type 3, which is technically the building that we're in right now. So that's a mix of non-combustible and combustible. So we see the walls, reinforced CMU, which is the wall structure. The roof structure is these glulam beams. These are combustible. Type 4 is heavy timber, cross-laminated timber. Not all of these are completely relevant to home design, but I want to share with you all the different construction types. And then last is type 5, which is combustible, which is wood stud construction, which is how most homes are built. So I get into that in saying that these homes that are built with reinforced concrete, can it be done? Yes, but it's probably 3 times the cost of type 5 or wood stud construction. So as you're getting money from and your insurance companies are going through grants, you don't want to spend it all just on you're probably not going to be able to afford a reinforced concrete building. There's also the aesthetics of it. I don't know if everyone wants to live in a concrete box. So I don't know how practical of a solution it is. Is it fire resistant? Yes, but there's also ways to achieve that with wood stud construction. So I want to talk about current code, which is right now it's the 2022 California Building Code, and then there will be local amendments by LA County.
You're fine.
So the nice thing is with current code is that it's going to create a home that's more fire resistant than what you had. I want to explain what some of those layers of defense are. First one is Class A fire rated exterior materials. So there are new products out there. There's fiber cement, or you may see it as like hardy plank or hardy board. That's a very popular Class A material. For roofing, most composite shingles are considered Class A. Standing metal seam is Class A. Stucco is Class A. There are some thermally modified woods that are Class A. There are cedar shingles that are Class A. Current code will make you use those materials. If you want to use just traditional wood siding, there's an option for that, but you have to put what's called exterior gypsum wallboard behind that wood siding so that your home is fire resistant. These are examples of some Class A materials. Class A materials would also apply for like decking around the house as well. So essentially, anything that's exposed to the exterior of your home when you go to rebuild it is going to be a Class A material, which means it's ignition resistant and has a low flame spread index. So getting back to the idea of you're not giving fuel, you're not giving food for the fire, right? It doesn't really like to burn on these surfaces. It's probably going to go to the path of least resistance to more flammable things around your house or on your property. Current code also makes you protect any sort of opening into your house for vents. So there's your crawl space vent. There's going to be probably a soffit vent if you have a soffit and ridge vent system to ventilate your roof. There's also things like dormer vents, or you might see like the little circular almost turbines that are attic ventilators. All of those require a metal mesh screen to prevent embers from getting sucked up into them. So when you have 100-mile-per-hour winds kicking up really hot embers to your house, they're getting everywhere. They can fly through these vent openings and start a fire. So current code is going to make sure you have screens to help protect against that. This is some examples of those screens. Another thing, and this is probably the most bang for your buck item that you can do, is fuel modification on your property and creating defensible space. So you have the opportunity to replant your site. Current code is going to make sure that 0 to 30 feet away from your property, what you plant is on their planting list. It also is going to dictate how densely you can plant and how tall you can plant. And the idea is you don't want to create basically a sweet spot of fuel right next to the perimeter of your house. So the zone from 30 feet to 100 feet away from your property, you have more freedom to plant what you want. I guess the flip side of this is it might seem a little rigorous in terms of what you get to plant on your property. So it's a balance of how fire resistant you want your property to be and how do you envision your landscape. But current code will make it so that your immediate site isn't creating additional fire hazard to your house. This is an example of defensible space and the different, I guess, protection zones around the house. I forgot to mention that new fire code requires a 5-foot ember resistant zone around your property. So live grasses, any sort of stored wood, anything that would be flammable, kept away from within 5 feet of your home. So this is going beyond code, although technically if you were to use a non-Class A covering, you would have to put 5/8 inch Type X gypsum wallboard at the exterior, all along the exterior of your house. This is that outside red line. Most homes nowadays, they use at least 1/2 inch. I'm just gonna say drywall. The more sort of general name is gypsum wallboard. You can opt for 5/8 inch gypsum wallboard, that's Type X. It's more fire resistant. If you put that on the interior side and exterior side of your house, you've essentially created like a bulletproof jacket for the structure, for the wood studs of your house. It's meant to be subjected to a high level of burning and withstand it for an hour. In the case of a wildfire, having your house being able to stand that level of burning for an hour would probably give you a good chance of the structure surviving, because the fire likely would move on to better fuel sources as it's being blown by high-powered winds. This is an example of what this looks like. It's just drywall, it's just a little bit thicker, and it's meant to give fire resistance. Another option for wood stud construction is you can get fire retardant treated wood studs that are meant to be fire resistive. Note that these are all things that are going above code, so they do add project costs, but are exponentially cheaper than building a concrete home. This is an example of fire retardant treated wood. You want to make sure it has these UL ratings on it. In working on Woolsey fire rebuilds, I know LA County really likes this particular product. Exterior Fire X would probably be what you'd want to use for your wood studs, or if you wanted to have any sort of wood structure outside your house that wasn't heavy timber, like a trellis, you would use fire retardant treated wood in order to get it approved by LA County. Another big bang for your buck item is automatic residential fire sprinklers. These would be sprinklers per NFPA 13D. There's 2 other types of fire sprinklers, one for commercial applications, another one for residential mid-rise buildings, but for residential, you would want to use NFPA 13D. I would also say putting sprinklers out at your soffit here, not just at the interior, I would be surprised if it's not required by code in the next 10 years for areas that are high fire hazard severity zones. It's not currently, but it probably makes sense to do. On a 1,500 square foot home, the fire sprinkler cost was somewhere between 20, 25 grand. I would say your fire sprinkler costs for your homes could be within 15 to 30 grand. So overall cost of your project, if you're going to spend 1.5 million in construction, I would opt for fire sprinklers. You don't have to have them be exposed like something like that. You can get concealed heads painted to match your ceiling. You can also get them in wood veneer. So even though that example there with the wood soffit and the white head, it sticks out, you can actually get them to disappear quite a bit. So if you don't like the look of sprinklers, you can hide them in residential applications. I also should mention roof sprinklers. It's less common, but I think it's going to probably become more popular in this area after these fires. It helps essentially wet your roof and wet the property around it so that when a fire is coming, getting back to the idea of you're not giving it fuel, you're starving the fire so that it doesn't see your house as a potential fuel source. One thing to keep in mind with fire sprinklers is you may want to keep them on a backup energy system that's maybe powered by a generator. I would even go so far as to put that generator in a concrete vault if you could. Find a way to make your emergency and fire sprinkler systems resistant to if there's a fire and resistant to if public utilities shut your power off, because you want them to operate when a fire's happening. With the roof sprinklers, there's probably a way to program them or have a manual setting so that you know if a fire is coming, you can turn them on so that your roof, your building, your immediate property is at least doused with water before the fire gets there. Another important one is fire-rated doors and windows. So I just talked about all the layers we can put on the exterior and how the studs can even be fire-treated, but you have this weak point of your home, right? Which is glass doors, glass windows. We live in Southern California. It's beautiful. The weather, even though it's a little cold today, is usually quite nice. And so you can have this great indoor and outdoor connection. So you want to have a lot of glass. And you want to have doors to the outside, and you should, but just know that it is a weak point. Oftentimes the easiest way the fire gets in, when it's burning in a wildfire, it's so hot, melts the glass, and now the fire is inside your house. So there are options to have resistance against that. There's different rated doors and windows. I think the lowest rating is 20-minute, meaning it can withstand a fire for 20 minutes. Highest rating is 180 minutes. Probably a good rule of thumb is if you've fire rated your exterior to about 1 hour is to do a 45-minute door and window. I would say 45-minute to 60-minute fire rated doors and windows makes sense. 180 is probably overkill. This is an example of fire rated glazing and door and window systems, and then the different UL certifications to look out for. And whoever your design team is, you don't have to retain all of this information. Whoever your design team is, your architect, or if it's a design build, they should be able to help you navigate these products, this information. So I talked about vent screens earlier on. That's if you have a vented roof or attic. You don't necessarily have to have that. An option that you could do is you would fill your roof rafters with batt insulation, which is typical. And then there will be plywood on top of your roof rafters. And then you would put rigid insulation, at least 1 inch of it on top of that. And then you don't have to vent your roof. That's advantageous because now you no longer have these openings where embers can get. So if you were sort of following every one of these layers, you would have Class A materials as your cladding. You would have the 5/8 inch Type X gypsum sheathing, providing a shield all around your building, and there's no penetration in that for any sort of venting through your roof. Only tricky thing is basement crawl spaces. If you are going to build a crawl space, you still would be required to ventilate it, so you would have screens there. But this is just one more layer of defense against fire getting into your home. And this is looking at what those assemblies might look like. So probably the most typical one is number 4, where the pink is batt insulation, that thin brown layer is plywood, and then the blue is rigid insulation. In this climate zone, you only have to do 1 inch of rigid insulation, as long as your batt insulation is roughly R30 to R38. So it's a tough time because people have lost their homes, and even thinking about building a new home is probably hard because you're still feeling the loss. If there's any silver lining, if you do want to rebuild and you do want to stay in this area, you're allowed to build an extra 10% of what was there. So you can replace existing plus 10%, and you're able to avoid lengthy CEQA reviews. If you're in coastal, but which doesn't apply, you'd be able to avoid coastal. So you're able to replace what's there and get a little more. If it's a 3,000 square foot house, that would be a 3,000 square foot house. That's a 300 square foot room. So that could be a guest suite. That could change a small living room into a great room. It also applies to building height. So if you have an 18-foot house, maybe now it pushes your house to 20 feet, and maybe you might consider a second story. So there's a way to rebuild your home and maybe add on to it and make it even closer to your dream home. You know, it's a chance to improve on what you had. So these are two Wildfire rebuild projects that I worked on that are completed. They're in the Santa Monica Mountains, went through LA County. They pursued the 100, so replace existing plus 110%. They had an old barn, I guess you could say, that was roughly 550 square feet. I think we got it to a little over 700 square feet. We pushed the height limit as well, and they used that as like a multi-purpose flex space. And then this is actually an admin building. It's for like a recovery, addiction recovery retreat. And it was a modest building, I think around 1,200 square feet. And we were able to get that to, we pushed the limit on that one, so we're going a little bit over the 110%. But we got that to about a 1,500 square foot building. The clay roof tiles, red clay roof tiles, are Class A material. Stucco's Class A material. We actually did use wood there. So behind the wood in this picture is the 5/8 inch Type X exterior gypsum sheathing, corrugated metal roofing, which is Class A. And we were able to get these approved relatively quickly. I came on the project after the debris removal process, but I think we navigated LA County in about 6 to 7 months to get our permits, which is decent timing. That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Our next speaker is a co-owner of a design build firm. Design build meaning they can do your floor plans, do renderings, submit the permits, and then also do the construction. So you're kind of working with the same person from start to finish. Been in the business for 25 years. Please welcome John.
As you can see, there's two of us up here. Peter, the engineer, who was really the catalyst of our team being involved with Realm. And thank you to Realm, Bijana, Demetrius, Dawn, Mark, excellent. Peter got stuck on an airplane and should be walking in that door any second now. But
Speaking to the mic, John,
sorry, Peter should be walking in the door any second now. And can you show me how we're operating? There we go. So I'm gonna just kind of breeze through our slides so there's not a lot of redundancy. And we can just kind of jump into the Q&A. Obviously, we know flying embers are one of the main causes here of spreading the fire. I don't think we need to beat the horse here with these issues. The flammable landscaping, obviously, when you guys get to that phase, is going to be huge. Dawn talked about all the debris removal, the soil testing. We didn't really get into that. These are the deep dives that are part of the whole bureaucracy of construction that tend to slow these projects down. As Demetrius mentioned, an owner's representative, construction manager, which is actually what I am, is a CM. It's integral to bring that person on as soon as possible so that person can be the main point of contact so you can stay focused on your career, whatever it is that you do that brought you to this stage, right? If you have those means, work with an owner's rep or a construction manager. They're going to need to, even when you get inundated with GCs and subcontractors, somebody's going to need to do scope gap review. Somebody's going to need to vet all those contractors, all those subcontractors. And it's critical. The budgeting, the bureaucracy, this is not, if it was a regular construction project, it's daunting, all right? So this is overwhelming. It's not going to get easier, right? So I know people said, slow down, take your time, but I suggest you reach out and find that CM, that owner's rep, or family members that can help you navigate the bureaucracy of insurance. Let's see here. Mark talked about all the different materials, so we really don't need to touch on that. Our Peter and myself do dabble in commercial construction as well as large residential projects. Again, the Class A roofing. Windows and doors, we'll get to a slide that I'll show you real quick here. So as you can see on this fire, this is one of my fire projects we just finished. The windows are gone, right? So understanding fire ratings and windows and doors and siding is all critical. And I think that's it for now from us. Peter will be joining me. He's the structural and civil engineer who can touch on more of those issues, like as Dawn mentioned, removing foundations. So again, there's so much upfront pre-construction planning that needs to go into this, whether it's getting as-builts done, knowing where all your utilities are, what the foundation is looking like. Again, my heart goes out to you. I personally lost the home I grew up in the Santa Rosa fire, the high school I went to school with, all of my relatives in the Santa Rosa area, we lost our homes. So this is very important to me to reach out and help you, because I've been there. Thank you.
All right, we have one more speaker, and then we'll do Q&A. Our next speaker is Charlotte. I work with Charlotte. We've worked together for years. She's an advisor at Realm. For lack of a better phrase, she's like a home therapist, meaning she'll talk to you about all of your ideas, help you crunch some numbers, introduce contractors, and really be with you from start to finish for the next 6, 12, 2 years. Please welcome Charlotte.
All right, guys. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. All right, well, very nice to meet you all. I'm Charlotte. Thank you for the intro, Carrie. I work at Realm, been at Realm for a couple years, really helping homeowners and everybody kind of navigate this rebuild process, do a lot of remodel projects, but really focusing on rebuilds right now. LA has been my home for the past 17 years. My very first year here actually went through a fire in Malibu and got evacuated. So cannot resonate with exactly where you were at, but experiencing that very terrifying, and really grateful to have the opportunity here to help you all rebuild, help you navigate this process. So I know not everybody might be completely ready to start the conversation. Everybody's at different points with where we're at, like with the insurance process, how much can you afford, figuring out how to really cover the gap. But assembling that team is really important, like Demetrius mentioned. So you might not have all the pieces to it yet, but getting somebody behind you who can really help you figure out, what can I afford? What kind of square footage should I be targeting? What do I need to know and what do I need to figure out before I can even start that process is really going to be crucial, to have somebody just on your team helping you navigate those conversations, figure out how much money do I need to close the gap there? How much am I getting from my insurance? How much more do I need to supplement to really get what I need in my home? I want to take you through a few examples from homeowners that I'm working with right now. So a few things that I would start thinking about kind of off the bat, reflecting on your home before. Start thinking about what worked well, what did you like? Were there things that you would want to change? What are you looking for in a new home? Do you want to change this entirely? Do you want a different style? Are there homes that were in your neighborhood that you loved? Finding inspiration photos, looking around, trying to find sources of inspiration for what you might look to do. really important to kind of start from there, so then you can start navigating that process and figuring out how much home can I build and what are my next steps in this process. And there's a couple pathways here. I think as the last speaker mentioned here, on building, and I think Mark brought this up too, on building back your previous home. So you can build back your previous home. The city has made available a lot of previous plan sets if they have your plan submitted. There are resources out there. Happy to provide you with a website too where you can find those, but they have been made available so that you can see any previous plans that might have been approved by the city, any kind of plot maps that you're looking at to make that process a little bit easier. That would be the easiest path for approval with the city. I know mentioning that it probably takes somewhere between 6 and 7 months, like Mark mentioned, for the home that he did in Malibu to get plan approval. That would definitely speed that process up. But the reality is not everybody's going to be able to build back exactly what you had before. So a lot of what I would recommend as part of this approach is really looking at what your must-haves are. What do I want to build? How large of a home do I want? What are my needs? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? What things are essential for you to have? And what are some nice kind of like wants that you might want to incorporate if you're able to? Really working backwards from your budget and a combination of kind of what do I want in this new home concept? What did I love from my own home? And then like reverse and value engineering that to really show what can I build is going to be really important. So maybe starting off with what like inspiration photos. This is an example of a homeowner that I'm working with right now. She lost her home in the Palisades fire and is looking to rebuild. This is kind of her dream home photo. This is what we've been talking through. This is what I love. This is what she really would like for her home to look like. And then we were working back from there. So what are the numbers of bedrooms and bathrooms that we're targeting? We're initially looking at 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. From our conversations, really looking at budget and what is going to be feasible within that budget. We're likely going to scale down to 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. But in the planning process, something that's going to be really crucial is working with the architect or engineer that she engages with and making sure that we're designing the home so that if she does want to expand it in the future, which she ideally would like to, that she'll have an easy path to do so. So keeping that in mind, she wants like a deck in the back or a covered patio too. Probably is not going to be part of this first phase, but making sure that when we're planning out the property, that we're planning for anything that we might want to do in the future as well. So really taking that into account and getting feedback on how to kind of scale down the build to fit within that budget to get you in your home sooner with the ability to make changes in the future. I know we talked a little bit about permitting process, maybe somewhere around 6 to 7 months on the good side of things. There's a couple different ways to approach this. So you obviously have to get some designs done. You need to start working with either contractor, design build firm, or architect on your plans. Definitely the first step. You'll see a couple different pathways here. So one pathway would be to start with just the design. This includes the planning process only, so designing your home. Some contractors may prefer this, and it can be a good approach because of unknown timelines, especially with everything a little bit up in the air in terms of when the hazardous waste removal will be complete, when the debris removal will be complete, material price and cost fluctuations too. Starting with the plan might be a good approach there. Might not be able to lock in a price up front, but there are opportunities to do so, and I'll take you through that here in a second. But this can be a good pathway to just start on that initial design, get something in place, and really important with this is to get at least a ballpark cost for construction here. Don't want something to be designed that is not going to be affordable or be cost prohibitive. The other approach with this is to do design build. So this includes planning as well as a construction cost up front. There are a lot of design build firms that are happy to do this for you, and a lot of contractors too that are willing to lock in pricing for you for 6, maybe even 12 months, pre-negotiating on materials prices for you. They understand this is going to be a long process and want to help as much as possible. So finding somebody who can at least give you a ballpark price for construction is going to be really important. Allows you to lock in your price early too, avoiding any kind of material cost increases. All right, so a lot to think about with working with contractors. So I'm sure a lot of you have been approached by contractors already, developers, seen various signs put up throughout your neighborhood. There's a lot of talk, a lot of information out there. A lot of people that I've been speaking with too are hearing numbers around $700, $1,000 a square foot for rebuilds. Those are really scary numbers, and those should not be what you're paying. So this is what's really crucial. There are going to be people that approach you and tell you that's what it's going to cost. It's important to be very transparent about your budget up front and leaving a buffer in there so that the right contractor who is vetted, somebody that you can trust, will be able to advise you on what you can do and how much of a buffer you should take into account for your property. Looking at things like the soil, the slope of your property, the utility connections, what it's going to take to reconnect the sewer lines, get your electrical turned back on even after the utility companies come in, what needs to be done there. So really important to find the right contractor to support you throughout your project. And Don mentioned checking your contractor's license, insurance information, checking their past projects. There's a lot of contractors coming in from out of state right now, getting their license in California. There's a lot of people from areas outside of LA that are coming in too. You want to find somebody who understands the area here. They don't necessarily need to have worked directly in your neighborhood, but they should be local to LA County, making sure that they have crews that are going to be available, that they're going to be able to complete your build in a timely manner, that they have really good relationships with their subcontractors, that these are people that they've worked with. Subcontractors are going to be busy. They are going to have a lot of options with who they can work with. So finding somebody who has a lot of experience, who has those good relationships is going to be really important. So your build gets done on time. You have a lot of consistency there and somebody that you can trust. Also, get multiple bids. Don't go with the first contractor that you speak with. Make sure that you're meeting with a couple of them. Make sure that you're comparing pricing there. The lowest price isn't always the best option. Really important to look through the bids that you're getting. What's included, what's excluded. Oftentimes things like finished materials get missed in these bids. A lot of them are not inclusive of those materials. So things like windows, doors, flooring, cabinetry, accounting for the cost of all of those. Some contractors might include some of those items for you. Some of them may exclude them. So being able to balance out what's included with what's excluded and see the true all-in cost of your project is really important. Talk to past clients that they've worked with. Talk to people, see other projects too. Something that a lot of people that I'm working with are doing right now is going to project visits for the contractors that they're considering. So go see other projects that they've done, projects that they have in progress too. See how their crews are operating, how clean is their job site. Look at all of these things to really evaluate and make sure you're making the right decision. And lastly there too, make sure everything's in writing. Don't sign anything with just a verbal commitment. Make sure timelines are clear, costs are clear, the scope is clear, that there's a really nicely laid out payment schedule for you. Like Don mentioned too, no upfront large payments. There's actually a $1,000 deposit max for the state of California towards construction. Anything else should be tied to a very specific thing that is being completed for you. So really important to look for those things so that you're paying for what's being done. You're not paying somebody who could potentially walk away from your project. So this is definitely the biggest point that it might be a little early, might feel super early, might still feel like not quite ready. Definitely still a good time to start talking to people, finding somebody that you can trust to just really advise you around what can you afford, what will be within my budget, what things should I be considering as I consider my rebuild. That's it. We're gonna do a Q&A session now, so if all the speakers can just come up on stage. We'll be passing mics around the audience too, or feel free just to raise your hand and speak up, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You didn't mention metal roofing, which I'm a big proponent of because we're thinking about our roof expires in 2026.
Right.
So why did you not mention that, or do you have any opinions about metal roofing?
When you say metal roofing, do you mean like corrugated metal or stainless steel metal roofing, or do you mean the actual roof structure?
No, the corrugated metal.
Yeah, no, I did. So that would be included in Class A coverings. I didn't have a picture. There's so many different Class A coverings. Metal roofing would be a phenomenal Class A covering, yeah.
A question, what would be the earliest time a homeowner can get their plans in to start that process? Is that the really critical point? Because it's frightening to think how many people are going to be rushing to get all that work in there. And we know in LA County it's a slow in normal times, and these aren't normal.
You can start now. You can start on plans now. I'm working with a few people that have already started on that planning process. It is the right time to start. There will probably be a rush to submittal. Not a lot of people have submitted yet. A lot of people are waiting to kind of see what we can afford. If you have a good sense of what your insurance payout might be, or a comfortable budget that you're working with, it's a great time to start on plans.
I would say this, at least get into the planning department in LA County, but in order to submit to building and safety, you will need like survey, you might need a geotech report, you're gonna need an architectural set, you're gonna need a structural set, and those things take time. So sort of the schematic design process with the architect would be like month and a half to get the design locked down enough, in which it makes sense to have consultants like a structural engineer begin their work. They'd probably be another month and a half. So anticipate from when you start sort of designing to when you can submit. Really aggressive timeline is 3 months, it might take 4. So I guess the biggest thing is understand what your budget is, which is unfortunately working with insurance companies, which may not be the quickest path. But yeah, the sooner you start, the better.
And to just chime in on that, so just so we're clear, there's design bid build, right, and design build. So we are talking different things, so you can just rush right into hiring a designer or architect, but coming from the design build side, it's best that you talk to your design build contractors, get the budgets from them, they can help you with pricing, and help you vet various designers and architects as well, and the value engineering, all that whole component, design build, is really to streamline the process of getting your drawings done, getting them submitted, doing the value engineering. It's an efficient process. As long as like everyone has said, you vet the people you're working with, then and/or a CM, construction manager you bring on, let him vet everybody out. Because it is trust, but all projects move forward, right? Bad projects are people related. It's the people, right? Or people complaining the drawings are bad, this is bad, the city's, awful, right? It's the people, right? It's not the design.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned a number of times, 6 to 7 months to get through plan check. I wasn't sure if that 6 or 7 months was to get through plan check, or was it included getting your drawings done and getting through plan check?
That would just be the plan check process. So I know from your experience too with LA County in particular, can be a little bit longer, but I would anticipate, like Mark said, about like 3 months on like the fast side for getting your plans drafted, getting everything submitted to the city. That comes with like quick decision making and everything too. That process can take a little bit longer. Mark, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I probably was being too optimistic. When I said
can be
6 to 7 months, that would include design and all consultant-related drawings, and then getting a permit. But that's like in a perfect world,
So getting through the city is like 3 months, or the county?
Getting through LA County. I mean, it is fire rebuild, so they're going to try to prioritize. They're going to try to streamline. You probably will get bogged down. There probably will be a lot of people applying. Hopefully, LA County's aware of this and anticipating and hiring more people. I don't know if I count on that. I would assume 4 to 6 months just for the getting through LA County review process. And then probably 3 to 4 months for the design portion that precedes that to get ready to submit for permit. I would just budget 9 months to 12 months from when you've decided, okay, I want to rebuild, to when you have a permit in hand.
I forgot to mention this, that about LA County will allow you to build 10% more than your existing square footage. So that doesn't, in my mind, align with what some of you have said about building your dream home and doing this and doing that. So if my house is 1,700, 1,800 square feet, that's 180 square feet, 170 square feet I can add, or can I make it larger?
Great question. So the extra 10% is you're allowed to stay within the rebuild provisions, which means streamlined review, and overall just makes the experience easier for you, right? So you can rebuild what was there, and then they want to incentivize you to do that. So they say, and you get a little bit more, you get the extra 10%. You don't have to do that. You could look at your parcel, and if it's a large lot, and the existing home was only like 1,700, you might be able by right, which is by zoning code, to build much larger than that, right? Probably up to, I'm just going to assume it's a 6,000 square foot lot.
7,000.
Okay. Yeah, you can probably get up to like a 3,000 square foot home, assuming it's not on a steep slope. And there's multiple layers that'll dictate how big of a home you can build, but likely you get closer to 3,000, which is you're going above that extra 10%. But now you're going through the typical review process, which will take a little bit longer.
And how much longer?
With this type of project, I don't know if CEQA is going to come into. California Environmental Quality Assessment, and they can take a very long time.
So to expedite, staying within that 10% range, you save time.
Yeah, what I don't know is if your project would have to go through CEQA, so let me research that a little bit more. Because if it doesn't, and you're just going through the typical LA County review process, it's not that much longer than if you're gonna do a fire
And
removal.
then this is following up on that question as far as insurance, and I don't know if anyone, so if you have a bigger project in mind, I'm not talking 3,000 square feet, but maybe 2,100, which is beyond the 10%. How does the insurance monies address that?
That's a nuanced question. So, because there's certain provisions of your policy, specifically code and ordinance, that may allow for the 10%. So that 10% number comes from the 10% code and ordinance provision in the policies themselves, and that's how they got that 10%. So there's some consistency between why they allow you to build 10% greater, because your policy allows for 10% upgrade under your code and ordinance provisions. And so this is why it's not a traditional home build, because your design build firm has to match what is a code and ordinance upgrade with what things are being rebuilt so that you can recover those dollars. Now, if you have replacement cost coverage as an example.
You mean extended dwelling coverage?
Not extended dwelling. This is like, there's secondary miscellaneous provisions in your policy. You're not paid that immediately, right? So if you have $1 million in coverage, you're not paid the 10% in addition to that automatically. So understand that like your coverage limits don't automatically pay you for the 10% upgrade for, new, whatever the code requirement was. And so you really do need to work closely with your design build firm to make sure that those items that were code related are actually accounted for with your public adjuster, your insurance adjuster, so that you can actually recover the dollars that are necessary under the policy.
And co-relating all the new fire safety.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Just sorry that we're talking.
Your time.
I'm confused about, because we're, she had the big loss and we're here. It's confusing to me when I look at her policy, and none of you are insurance people, but.
Well, I'm a licensed public
You
adjuster.
are, okay, so extended coverage, she has up to 50% more. Of course, that's not automatic, but it's not to expand her house, it's still to restore her 1,700 square feet, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
So that's the term is called betterment. No, you can't be made any better, but that's nuanced, right? So it's how you say it. So you heard me say like strategy, it's all strategy and how it's stated to the carrier, not necessarily that you can't build a bigger house, right? And so somebody has to sort of piece that together and present that to your carrier so that you can actually recover those dollars.
Can I ask a question within the panel then? I have a client, that prospective client, and they said they talked to their insurance company and they've already agreed on like 1.5 million. How does that get paid out? I mean, do they have to keep submitting to the insurance company to kind of show what the construction is? Or is it just like, okay, we agree on this lump sum, and then you can use that 1.5 million to make they got to use that budget to make your bigger home work? Or is it something that you have to keep checking in with insurance periodically and they can track what you're doing?
Very nuanced question. There are two forms of that. Did they waive their right to any additional coverage when they accepted the 1.5?
Okay.
Is the first question you got to answer. Because an insurance company will offer you a lump sum and ask you to waive the right to any additional dollars. That's not typically happening that I've seen so far. Normally that's the initial sum, right? And so there was some confusion early on. People were like, is this all I'm getting? No, this is just the initial check. Just so you know, there's no downside in you accepting that initial check. If some of you are like, hey, I'm not gonna accept this initial amount of money because I'm worried that means that's all I'm gonna get. It's not how it works. Take the money, put it in your bank account, start earning interest, okay? Which is really important. You should be doing that anyway, right? Because you probably are gonna have that coverage gap. The secondary part of your question though is somebody then does have to justify back to the carrier why that additional dollar amount is even necessary. And it's far better to come from one of these people than it is to come from you. right? Because you unfortunately don't have a ton of credibility with the carrier, which is sad, but that's just the way that it is. And so these people with credentials and the ability to put something on a piece of letterhead and hand it to the carrier is really, really helpful in sort of expediting and accelerating your ability to get that. If you sort of think about it from an insurance company's perspective, they're trying to mitigate their losses, right? And they want to be helpful to you, but they also don't want to be scammed in the process, right? And so the more legitimate request, the easier it will be for you to recover the dollars.
I have a comment. A couple asked me, I've got an older home and I may not have blueprints. When I'm doing demolition and somebody says, I'd like to provide an existing blueprint of what the house used to look like, at the point of demolition where we clean the lot off and we have the exposed concrete foundation with pictures of your house, I can get 80% accurate in an existing blueprint of your house. So that if you were going to rebuild your exact house again, we can get very close to what that existing blueprint was. So there's a step while the demolition is happening at cleanup. You would ask us to pause so we could come in a day, somebody could come in a day and blueprint the existing foundation. We can give that back to you almost exact. We know where the plumbing is, we know where all the facilities were. All we need is a few pictures and we can represent what the existing house was. Many houses, if you saw what I looked at from houses built in 1940, it's on a graph paper with an outline and there's very little detail to it. You can't even tell what the inside of the house looked like. So a lot of this existing blueprint is a very important factor that you guys should take into consideration if you can't find your blueprints.
Any question over here?
It's a two-parter. First one would be for Demetrius. I don't know if anybody else has gone to the recovery website and looked at the debris removal portion, but I got the impression that the Army Corps of Engineers is going to come in and just take over and clean it out really quick. My question for you is, what's your experience with how much is it going to be the Army Corps of Engineers and how much is it going to be private contractors like yourself coming in and doing the actual debris removal?
Well, my general recommendation to folks is that you should follow the Army Corps process. It is the most economical way to get that done. In most instances, I've seen 95% of folks use the Army Corps process, right? And part of it is because of the cost, as the gentleman earlier outlined. It's just prohibitive under most projects in these under insurance scenarios to pay out of pocket and to support the rebuild cost simultaneously. And so, and I think one of the big questions I don't think anybody's mentioned is really, as it relates to that right of entry form, what should I do with my existing foundation? Should I reuse it? Should I not? Right? There's some open questions there. I think you want to answer that now. The other point that I'd point out is that the Army Corps, the right of entry form can be amended. So if you said, oh, I already submitted it, right? And I didn't ask them to remove my foundation. You can resubmit that form. It's okay, right? There's still time. And so hopefully that answers your question. I think predominantly people are using the Army Corps, and a good point of reference just to Google is to look at the Lahaina debris removal, which is completed, I think, 4 or 5 months ago. And in that scenario, it really was just the erosion control had been placed in. I think they put gravel down on every single lot. It was I think it was 5 feet around the burn area. And so you just ended up with effectively a gravel lot once it was done.
And the second part of my question, the contractors and the engineers, the house I have was built in 53 on a slab foundation. After the fire was intense, would you think the slab is still reusable, or is it time to start from scratch?
It's a tough question. Obviously, you can do non-destructive testing of the foundation, and you can determine that with labs. But depending on the extent of the fire, sounds like it's probably burned down.
Yeah, the walls are still standing, but everything else came down.
Yes, yes. So the slab foundation is a fairly older technique to build the foundations. These days, we do a slab foundation. You do a post-tension cables to strengthen that foundation. Typically, it's a continuous footing type foundation with a crawl space as part of the newer construction. So it's, I would say, case by case basis. I would definitely start with a non-destructive testing of the foundation and then go from there.
Thank you.
Well, one comment is that when I have my equipment out there, it takes me 2 days to remove the foundation, 1 to 2 days. So a 53-year-old house, earthquake requirements, when you start adding everything up, oftentimes I'll tell the client it's less expensive for me to just remove and start over. And so I think that's an important factor.
Yeah, let me add on to that. So your existing slab, even if it wasn't even that damaged, right, built 50 some years ago, it still has to meet current building code for lateral, so for seismic events. You probably have to go in and strengthen it quite a bit, at least all around the perimeter, some points in the interior. And in order to do that, you can either go to the outside of where the slab is, but there will be other instances where you actually have to break apart some of the existing slab, thicken it, put in rebar. You also don't know how much rebar was used in the slab, even if they don't do post-tension. So it likely is just going to be more cost-effective to take it out and build new. Certainly will make the structural engineer's life a little easier and less guesswork.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I had a question about the debris removal. I opted into phase 1 and phase 2, and then when at some point I read something somewhere that homeowners will be notified for phase 2, because EPA is already on our street now. But before phase 2 starts, that we would be notified and we could be there on site to watch the debris removal. Is that-
They're supposed to contact you 72 hours before it starts.
Okay.
And there's no rhyme or reason to who gets what and where.
Yeah.
It's I was on site yesterday in the Palisades, and we were talking to a FEMA and EPA inspector, and they both said, as they clear the lots of the hazardous and they release it, they're notifying phase 2 contractors. And so at that point, it's a random.
So they don't wait for a whole street to have the check marks that the EPA has cleared?
He didn't tell me that. I don't have that answer.
And then what about like hardscape, like the driveway? Is that going to be removed or not? Probably not.
Probably not.
I just spoke to Army Corps on Thursday. They said no. They said
They're not
they
going to
need
remove
foundation
hardscape
and
and
3
driveway.
feet around it.
Okay.
It's good to know. What are you supposed to do if you have a pool or a driveway or anything on your driveway that needs to be cleared?
You gotta do it yourself. Or we can have to do it yourself, right?
You gotta go talk to the Army Corps of Engineers.
Well,
And we do that.
this is where I would always say to you all, it's about what you ask for, right? Because it's really being, when you're in these town halls, say that to your local politician. Hey, we want to have the pools removed. We want to have the driveways done. There's no prohibition around those dollars being spent to do those things, right? It's just that somebody somewhere decided that they weren't going to do those things, right? So it's one of the things that's important to understand is that disaster recovery in this country is quite a blank check, but the Stafford Act, which controls disaster recovery in the United States, it really does, a lot of the normal rules don't apply, right? Because the whole idea is like, hey, we want to get on with this. We want to get it going, right? And so it's really important in these moments to be really vocal. Hey, we want the pools removed. Do that, right? Hey, we want the driveways done. And what you'll see is programs start to change as your local community and local officials start to respond to those needs, right? It doesn't always end the way it started, right? And so be aware of that as this thing goes, and that's why I say, hey, you kind of might want to go a little bit slower, because as the thing turns, you'll start to see, oh, they became aware that this was an issue. and then they changed the program to accommodate whatever your needs were.
I don't have the answer to this, maybe you do. If they wanted the driveway removed, would they be able, and FEMA and the Army Corps is doing the work? Is the homeowner able to go to that contractor and say, hey, I'll pay you to remove it?
Well, here's what's interesting.
Because that's gonna be the cheapest thing you could do.
So the debris monitor doesn't have any say. So if you were there and you told, hey, go ahead and remove the driveway, it would just get included in the actual yardage that was reported back to the debris removal site. So it's nuanced, right? There's nobody standing there saying, don't remove that driveway, right? There's nobody standing there saying, don't remove that pool, right? It's more so like, hey, get a phone tree going. Hey, they're on your street. They're at your house, right? They're gonna call you 72 hours beforehand, right? And so that's the way it functions, is that there are debris removal monitors that go alongside every single truck, watching to see that the tonnage actually came from the appropriate area or the appropriate street. Somebody asked a question earlier about the order. So what typically happens in the debris removal program is that it has to do with like how it's billed back to the county, right? So what's happening is that ECC is basically saying, the field manager who's managing that particular site is basically saying, okay, hey, contractor, you have this street, right? You have this road, you have these sites. And then that's how they coordinate all the subcontractors who are working the burn area.
Question here in front.
Yeah, we had talked with the county and with Army Corps of Engineer, and what we were told was that the debris removal will be done, and assuming you have a debris removal policy, let's say it's for $25,000,
yeah,
then we will take that, but nothing more. You're not, if it costs whatever, you're only on the hook for what your policy provides for. But I heard a couple times the government is gonna, from y'all, the government's gonna pay for it.
Well, that's if you have coverage, right? If your policy has a debris removal provision within it, then the process is, you remember in my slide I said, hey, maximize your insurance coverage. That's all the federal government is doing, is they're maximizing your coverage to pay for the debris removal, right? And so if you don't have coverage, then it's gonna be paid for by the taxpayer.
Well, again, about debris removal, we opted in with the county, and we submitted our form like first day, thinking maybe it is first come, first serve. We need to go back and modify it. Is that gonna put us, if it is first come, first, is it gonna put us like back of the line?
No, it will
if there
not.
is a line?
No,
Okay.
it's not an order sort of thing. It is entirely based on, what that FEMA contractor, ECC, how they're allocating resources across with their subcontractors.
I have a question. Regarding the debris removal, I have approximately about almost 400 square feet of driveway, that's asphalt, and I do have utility lines running underneath. Where do I go from here? Remove them or replace my utilities first? Or
Army Corps engineers are making those decisions. If there's something that, in other words, your utility line
like
is,
my sewer line, my water line, and what have you, runs through a whole acre of the property.
and they're making
It's
the
split
Army,
between-
yeah, the Army Corps engineers making that determination. It may not be replaced. It may or may not be replaced.
This could be, to your point, right, this could be actually beneficial to your property, because if there's asphalt paving over a utility, that utility is protected during the fire, theoretically speaking, right? So as long, obviously, we all know how much it costs to install per foot, utility lines, but hopefully that whole run that's been protected can stay in place. Then the question is about the connections at the end of those lines, to the main sewer line in the street and at your house.
I've heard a lot about this question around like underground and utility lines and things of that nature. Remember, I talked about the other 14 agencies. That would fall under a grant from the Department of Energy, right, to the utility. right? That would also fall under FEMA's hazard mitigation program, right? So we need to, the HAZMIT program doesn't have a grant program established just yet, right? And so that will be unique, right? So when you think about like, okay, I know you want to go quickly in your rebuild process, but you'll start to see more programs roll out as these agencies start to figure out what is needed in this particular community, right? So a great example is the effort in Puerto Rico, right? There were major utility efforts there as an example, right? That was years later, actually. And they came back and actually underground the utilities after the fact. Now, hopefully we're more efficient this time, but I think you should just anticipate that some of these other things will turn on as the recovery effort moves forward.
Thanks, Demetrius. We're gonna move Q&A to like one-on-one time. So we're all gonna hang out, you can ask one-on-one questions.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly, everyone, thank you, huge thank you to our presenters. I learned a ton. I hope everyone else did. I think I'm walking away understanding that while this is an entirely overwhelming process, if you have a strategy and you have a team, you can make it happen. So please hang around, ask our speakers questions. We have Realm team members in the back. If you need a strategy, you need a team, talk to us and we can help you out. All right, thank you everyone.